Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast, where we're out here working with the goal of creating better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians by helping these two professions better understand each other with the ultimate goal of making customers happy in the homes they live in and the buildings they work in. In this episode of the Building HVAC Science Podcast, Erica is joined by guest Marco Radocaj from Balance HVAC in Florida. Now, Marco is going to share his insights, and of course, like all of our interviews start, we get the backstory on how he entered the business and the kind of learning curve you have to go through. Almost everyone has to go through in developing their skills in the trade. And he gets into how he's developed his philosophy behind Balance HVAC, committing to the emphasis on improving how homes are balanced regarding enclosure, occupants, and mechanical systems. 3 elements there. He highlights the importance of addressing more than just cooling, but aiming for a holistic approach to home comfort. And boy, do we love that when we talk about whole home science. Got some other great notes on the approach that Balance makes to the business in our show notes. So please take a look at that. Without further ado, let's get into Eric Kaiser talking with Marco Radocaj on revolutionizing home comfort. Marco Radocaj's approach, his balanced approach to HVAC.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Eric Kaiser here. Bill Spohn is off today, so we're not going to hear the melodious voice of Mr. Spohn, unfortunately. But we do have a special guest with us today, Mr. Marco Radocaj. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Florida of Balance HVAC. Marco, welcome to the show.
Eric, thank you very much. You were really close in the pronunciation. It's Radocaj, but
Radocaj. Okay. I got to make myself a note on that.
Yeah.
I was close. And it's not spelled like that at all because it's got a J on the end of it, which really threw me off.
It is a mess. It's the reason that we're Balance HVAC and not Radocaj HVAC is that no one would know what that was, how to say it or spell it. So I am used to it at this point. It's a very Croatian last name.
Oh, nice. I was curious about where the origins of that spelling came from. So very cool.
Very Croatian.
Very cool. So Balance HVAC, that's an interesting name. And how did you come about that name? And let's know a little bit about you, learn some about you.
I'll start at the beginning. It goes all the way back to when I was in school. I was at Villanova University. I was a sophomore, and this person walked into my sociology class, and I immediately knew that that woman was going to be my wife. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her, but I knew that she was going to be my wife. After meeting her, I quickly found out that I was going to be living in Vero Beach, Florida, because that's where she was from. Once we got married and we moved down to Vero Beach, when you're mid-20s, you're still trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. Her dad owned a big air conditioning company in town that was around for 1 million years. So I got thrown into a truck. I got into the trades. And I can't emphasize enough how little I knew at that point. And I say this every time I tell this story, is I honestly had no difference between a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver. It was that green of a new guy. On my first day, I was doing a maintenance with a seasoned tech and go out and wash the condensers, and he comes out and I'm hosing off a generator. So we started there.
Well, it was a clean generator after you were done, though, yeah?
Hey, the cleanest generator in town. I took a lot of pride in that generator. So I do, you advance through the trade, you work with different guy. The guy who really showed me the trade his name's Ricky. And I think everybody who really gets into this trade has a Ricky. Everybody has somebody who, at the beginning, there's a lot of new ideas and things to learn, and you're dealing with customers. And then you meet this one person who's a real tradesman, somebody who is impressive when you meet those people. They know how to do everything seemingly. They can explain and answer all your questions. So I rode with Ricky for about a year. He taught me a lot about the trade. I thought I was a good service technician. Looking back, I was really good at making them turn back on again. So as the career advanced, my brother-in-law bought a smaller AC company, and I went over and walked through that acquisition as the general manager. And that's when I really started to get thrown into the mix. I grew up in the trade strictly service. I had no idea how ducts worked or what was going on in attics because I never had to go up there unless that's where the air handler lived. So as we get into it and I'm going over to this new company, the deal is I was a little hesitant. I have no idea how to install an air conditioner or ducts, but the old owner's son was sticking around as the install manager. So as COVID started to hit and we became essential workers on that same day, the old owner's son told me he's given me the 2-week notice he wants to go be a boat captain. So now all of a sudden we're deemed essential workers. No one wants us in their house. We're in the midst of COVID and we have no install manager. And I have to guide this ship, so to speak, with no understanding of how any of this works. I stumbled upon the ACCA website. I really wanted to jump right into manual D and get the ducks figured out, but unfortunately you got to learn a few other manuals prior to that. But it worked out great. My family isolated it at a lake house in Georgia for 2 weeks, and I isolated in front of a computer at my house for 2 weeks. Went through all the manuals, gained certification, and that's when I feel like I really started to get into this trade. And I went through that whole background of the story because I think that's what Balance HVAC does, is we really want to elevate the expectations of what homeowners and customers can expect from their AC contractor. I think currently the bar is it blows cold air, which is a really, really low bar in terms of a pass-fail. So we are very conscious of the fact that we are a part of a system as the HVAC trade, and we need to be aware and really have a strong understanding of the enclosure, of the occupants, how they're using the house, what their expectations are from their machines and their mechanical in their house. So that's what Balance HVAC is that we want to balance the home with the enclosure, the occupants, and the mechanical system. And that's the song that we sing and what we try to execute every time we go into someone's home.
Wow, that's very cool. And I love the story there and got the background of coming in with a long-standing company. And Balance HVAC, is that the company that you said your brother-in-law bought into and started up, or is that something that you've created on your own now?
This is brand new. It's something we created. We're 10 months old. We'll celebrate our 1-year birthday in the beginning of December, but it's been a great first year. We have some contractors and other people that we've built some rapport with that jump right on board, because once you get the product of a attic restoration or that balanced home that we really stress, people buy in. And it's not anything you really need to sell after that point, because once you've been in 1 or 2 or 3 of these houses, when they're done, it is night and day. It's something that you can almost hear it. It is a more quiet house. It is a more balanced house. Every room feels the same with doors open, doors closed. And it feels the same every day of the year, whether it's hot Florida summer, 105 degrees at 4 p.m., or it's January and it's 75 degrees. It runs the whole gambit, and everybody really gets it once we get our foot in the door, so to speak. So,
gotcha. How did that come about then, where you transitioned out of that family company into Balance? And you mentioned something in there too about attic restorations. And I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Attic restorations, and it's not just a Balance HVAC thing. We have a group of contractors in town because it does take a village to really execute that whole attic restoration process. And what that is, it's the thoughtful alignment of a home's enclosure, its occupants, and its mechanical system. And it really hit home with me after going through those manuals, and you see that there's a right way to do things. And it wasn't my opinion. It wasn't the opinion of one other guy. It was this team of engineers and manufacturers and distributors and all these really smart people, way smarter than I'll ever be, that got together and made these manuals. And they give you worst case scenarios. So there is this wiggle room. But once you have this understanding of how the whole thing should be executed and built, you see that this is possible. And it's not ridiculously hard. It's not ridiculously precise, but it's ridiculously comfortable. And there's a ridiculous amount of control at the end of that process. That's what got me into it, is after you learn the right way to do things, you don't want to go back to the wrong way. And I just felt like the only way to really be able to do things the way that I wanted to do them, and everybody else that came over with me to Balance wants to do them, is we had to start fresh. We had to start fresh with clients. We had to start fresh with customers, because we wanted to change the expectation. We didn't want you to think that we were going to be extraordinarily fast. We didn't want you to think we're going to be extraordinarily inexpensive, because I think that's what a lot of air conditioning companies, especially in my neck of the woods, really hang their hat on, is we're very fast and responsive, where we're very inexpensive and cheap. But I don't think there's any way to really undercut the value of a very high quality job. And someone that understands the importance of the enclosure and duct leakage and air balancing, like all of our technicians do, you get this different result. But you just have to have that different expectation going in. So that's how we got to the Balance beginnings.
Well, that's cool. I see you've got some tools there sitting in the background. I see what looks to be a duct tightness tester over there, and maybe a thermal camera in the background. So clearly you're doing a lot of testing on the house.
Yes.
This is one of the things that I think this segment of the industry that's really going from HVAC and expanding that look from the equipment and maybe some of the ductwork outwards to that building shell. I'm seeing a number of companies getting involved with this now across the industry. And it's fascinating to me about how each one of them is talking to their customers and really getting their customers interested in on the same page. Would you be willing to share some of that process with us? Like how you are maybe piquing that customer's interest enough to have some extra work or some non-traditional work done on their houses?
Yes, the phrase we use and we always say it to our customers is that without these tools, without being able to measure and verify what we're doing, we are chasing ghosts. It is air, no one can see it, and most people think it is nothing. And a really good thing, and I wish I could remember the person who suggested us doing this, but we've been doing it from the beginning, and it's been a great response as we start with our initial visit. The first time, my name is Jarrett, I'm with Balance HVAC. What do you love about your air conditioning system? And they usually don't have an answer. They usually don't have anything that they love about it. And then we can quickly change it. Is there anything that we could improve? Is there anything that you're having issues with? And a lot of times they're the experts of their home. We all understand that the person living there every day knows that house better than we ever could understand it. So when they're giving us instances where this room in the back is very hot, or this room very close to the air handler is very cold or very hot, or a big one is at night, I wake up every night and it's 68 degrees in my bedroom. I turn my thermostat way down and I'm still sweating. Like these are very obvious issues that can be fixed with, again, unfortunately, non-traditional air conditioning visit type fixes where it's sometimes air sealing, sometimes adding returns, sometimes balancing the amount of supply air into a room. But we set the expectation where we let them know going in, this is our baseline. Here's what's off, whether it's over or under with our baseline. And then we show them at the end, like, hey, we have hit these numbers. We set this clear expectation of what we wanted to have happen at the end. So now we're not chasing ghosts. We've actually changed the pressure in this room with the door closed, or we've actually changed the amount of return air leakage going through your system. And we can measure that, quantify that, and they feel the results. And it is something that we do follow up on. We want to make sure we're not going with the tried and true air conditioning contractor, no news is good news report. We want to make sure that we're checking back in. We want to make sure they're getting those desired results because it can be a project sometimes. It can be a little bit out of their comfort zone if we're adding ducts or moving ducts. It's a very high success rate when you take the time to explain the process and then show them the math as much as they want to see of it. But there's a million different tools and apps that make those things very easy for a typical homeowner to look at and understand. Am I in this green zone, which would be good, or the yellow zone, which would be, it's okay. But it's available, and there's a million different ways to put that in front of someone and let them know, like, hey, you're here. We want to take you to this place. And then just keep them in the loop with how we're getting there and what the results will be, and even letting them know that at the very beginning. We've had a lot of success with that.
That's fantastic. And I really love that approach of asking the customer what they love about their system. That is a phenomenal nugget. If people listening to this, if they take one thing away from this, that to me right now, that's a huge takeaway. And I love that question.
I wish I could give the person credit who said it. They're probably listening to it because I'm sure they listen to the same type of podcast and they're just like, I said that was me. But whoever you were, thank you very much. I think it's a great starter.
Yeah, well, thank you for passing it along because I think that nugget right there may be worth the time that it is listening, that our listeners are taking in to listen to this.
We should wrap it up. Let's get out of here, man. Shut it down. Roll the credits.
That's it. Let's roll the credits. We're done here. But I think we might have some more nuggets to dig out. Where do you go once you have that homeowner's interest? You have their interest focused on you now, because that's a great way to get their interest focused on their system and focused on you, saying, hey, what do you love about it? Not what don't you like about it, but what do you like about it? Because to me, that's automatically, they're going to have to think about that, because a lot of times we don't focus on the things that we really like about these things in our houses.
Absolutely.
I'm rolling that around in my head and things are just exploding in the back of my mind going, I love this.
It is so fun. And I don't get to do it as much as the guys that are actually going to the houses. But anytime I get to say it, every response starts with a pause. Like you said, like it's something where like I could tell you 10 things I don't like about it, but that pause, and I love the responses after because I rarely get the same ones twice. And it's just really funny to see that reaction, but it opens so many doors. It's usually very telling. The longer the pause, it's usually the more issues they have.
Yeah, they're having to stop to think about that. And that is an awesome way to get people to really think about it. Once you get that, like you get their interest, what testing are you doing on the houses? And what tools, you mentioned some software tools and things like that. What tools are you using to identify these issues and then display them?
The big one we use is the TEC TrueFlow Grid, their flow app. They have nice, again, very user-friendly end user documents to hand a customer that will show them static pressure. And that's something that a lot of customers have a hard time grasping onto. If I just want to simplify it quickly to a homeowner, do your ducts match your air handler? Are they too big, too small? But we can size these correctly. And that's a really nice tool, a really nice feature. Obviously, we got you noticed it already, the thermal imaging. I think thermal imaging goes a really long way. And every assessment of before we get into the attic restoration process, we call it a comfort report, but it is a very thorough, expansive testing of the whole house of major components. So we'll do dominant duct leakage tests on each system individually. We'll measure static pressure on each system individually. We'll use every manufacturer's fan curve to give the estimated airflow. If it's underperforming, we let them see how much it's underperforming. You do room by room pressure balancing with the doors closed, because a big issue and complaint down here is it's hot at night. Why is it hot at night? So that's always a good place to start. But I think the one that makes the biggest difference, again, and it tags along with that thermal camera, is that we crawl through your attic as much as we can to the most shallow point we can get to, because we need to be accountable for that enclosure. And whether it's encapsulated attic or it's bad insulation, blown-in insulation, there's a way that it needs to be applied. And we could be the best air conditioning company in the whole wide world. We are not going to beat the outside conditions of Florida ever. It's enclosure first, and then we can start talking how they want to dial in that mechanical. But a lot of times, once we are able to show side-by-sides of, again, this is my hot bedroom that I sleep in, and we can show you these infiltration points from below with thermal imaging, and then give you the, hey, and now I'm standing on top of your ceiling, showing you there's no insulation in this area, or maybe there's a huge duct leak and there's like water condensating in that area. But it's really hard to just talk about air and not give some type of visual concept. Again, it's that chasing ghosts mentality. You're trying to explain something that to most people doesn't exist. So it's something that you have to make tangible and then relate it to how it's impacting their day to day. And it's really easy for me. This is something that came up with my wife and I. We moved into her home that she grew up in. It was her parents' home prior. So we moved into this house, and we were at that house frequently. It was in great shape. The guy owned an AC company. So it had new metal ducts, spray foam insulation. And when they lived there, they had no problems. And we'd always go over there. It was fine. And then my family of 6 moves in, and we're doing laundry from sun up to sundown. We turn our thermostats to 72 degrees at night. The doors open and close probably 600 times before noon. So we're using this house differently. So 2 of my 4 kids were having a lot of health issues, cough, runny noses. They were seeing doctors and specialists and taking medicine, and nothing was really solving any problems. We found some mold behind a shelf in the laundry room. It wasn't active, but in that period where we were testing the mold, we go into a condo to stay for a few days, and all those little issues that the kids were having went away. It was the first time my youngest son, my wife said, seemed like all the other kids. He felt like he was normal now. He stopped crying for the first time in 6 months. So it's something where it's once you've lived through it and you've experienced those health issues, and those are the extreme sides of it. That's a little bit more than just the comfort aspect, but it's a big part of what we're doing is we're making this environment, this ecosystem inside of closed walls. Health of the occupants is really important. I always compare it to a fish tank, where if you're living in a fish tank and your filter, it's on, it's running, it's filtering, I guess, but there's stuff growing on the walls of that tank, or the fish are getting sick. That's not a good filter. You want something that's going to keep the water clean, it's going to keep the walls clean, it's going to keep the fish healthy. And that's essentially what you're doing, especially in an encapsulated attic, where there just needs to be some accountability for how does this work with where we're actually living and what we're doing inside of that house. So we've been through it, unfortunately, but it's nice that you've been through it so I can speak first person when I'm like, hey, this is a process. It's going to take a lot of communication, and you're going to have an open mind about a lot of these things because it's concepts people don't usually talk about, but the end result is a lot of control of your house. and a lot of control of the ecosystem that your family lives in, your friends come over to, and it's very important to a lot of people.
Yeah, and having that firsthand experience, I think, is fantastic on that. So you did, and obviously this is Florida, so you're talking about a lot of sun, and this is where you focus on attics a lot. Now, that's not saying attics aren't important in the rest of the country either, because let's face it, the attic is oftentimes a big leak in houses, whether it be air transfer or heat transfer. Either way, oftentimes it's a big place where we get a lot of our load from in houses. What do you mean when you say attic restoration? To me, when I hear restoration, I think of taking an old car that's maybe a little bit rusty and beat up or something like that. Taking something like that and making it new again. So I'm guessing you're making that attic new again?
That's typically the end goal. And it's a lot of communication with the homeowner, but we want to make sure that, I guess a lot of it has to do with the area that we live in, is that a lot of the houses, the big boom down in Vero Beach, I don't know if I could speak for all of Florida, but it was like that 1999, 1998, a lot of houses went up, a lot of buildings were made. Fast forward to now, like people have made improvements to their homes since then. The average solar heat gain of windows prior to 1999 was like half of what it is now. I don't remember the exact numbers. I did look it up too because I wanted to like be really impressive as I'm talking to you. I can't remember them now. But you can't get windows as inefficient or as bad as they made them when the house was originally built. So as people replace their windows, they're more energy efficient. How are they more energy efficient? The air conditioning doesn't need to run as much, but no one's updating these air conditioning or mechanical systems. Another thing I always say is I wish I could just follow around roofing companies, because every roofer, I see ridge vents. You can look at these neighborhoods. There's 50 houses all built the same way. Some have new roofs, some don't. The older roofs all have ridge vents. The newer roofs, no one has ridge vents. So you're dramatically changing the way this house is designed to operate, but not updating the rest of the house. So that attic restoration is really just bringing everything in line to whatever parameter you want to meet. So if you want to keep the open attic concept, we can do that. We're going to make sure the rest of your house is prepared for that. If you want to encapsulate your attic, we can do that. But we want to make sure that the rest of your house is up to date with that, with the way that you're insulating it now. And I think the encapsulated attic is a really big opportunity for a lot of people, because I think it's something that was really misunderstood, like variable speed equipment was when it came out, where they think it's going to solve all these big problems. And it turns out it really didn't. It really didn't. Like, I think the big sell with the attics was that it's going to make your house, it's going to solve all these problems because you're not going to have any issues, because we're going to re-insulate your attic and it's a forever insulation. But what you don't realize is that you're occupying the amount of volume that you're occupying now. Is that I always say that if you have a single story house and you encapsulate that attic and you don't condition that space somehow, it's like building a 2-story house and only living on the first floor and expecting everything to be totally fine and having an unconditioned second floor above it. There's just all this volume and all this air and all this place for things to go and hide. And then when you have an air leak or you have a major pressure imbalance in these exterior rooms, that air is going to come back down. It's going to make itself known. You're going to find out. And it might be in an area of the house that you don't use a lot and you don't notice it until it's a big, gross, hairy problem. So it's something that we really spend a lot of time talking about, learning about, so we can explain it to customers, because that's always the hard part, is being able to convey that message to the homeowner where, hey, like, this is great. I'm glad that you have spray foam and new windows and a new roof, but your house is not in line mechanically. You have complete, like, way oversized air conditioning system. You have a way undersized duct system, and that's probably 90% of the houses everywhere. I was going to say Vero Beach is probably everywhere.
Yeah, sadly, I think you're probably right. It's probably all across the country and anywhere that uses forced air systems. A lot of the ducts are undersized for the equipment. But then we get into, is the equipment oversized for the structure? That happens a lot. And then when you change the structure, like you mentioned, I think of it as bringing muscles into alignment in a human body. If we have one muscle that's really strong and another one that's really weak, you can mess yourself up really easily with that. And if we don't bring all of those components or muscles of the house into alignment, the HVAC, the shell, the ducts, boy, it can mess a house up big time. So you're doing a lot of that as well, it sounds like, since you learned about all the different ACA manuals, the ACCA manuals. Are you using that process or finding yourself using that process a lot after you fix the attic?
Yes. The way the process always starts is we have a great energy rater. He is thorough, almost to a fault, where he is very technical. He does everything by the book to the point where other contractors don't like to work with him because he won't make things work. This is how it has to be, and this is what we know. And then once we get his information, here's the load calculation, manual S, manual J, manual D, that's what we're going to build now. And it's something where we want to make sure that, again, we're looking at that manual J, that we'll do a blower door in the house. We want to make sure that we are at or under that estimated infiltration rate. With the manual D, and to this day, we've done it probably like 100 times, and it still gets me really fired up every time that we do. It's really easy to draw that duct system, build that on the computer, but then to go out and actually build it, you don't expect it to be exactly how it was drawn up. And a lot of times you have to make field changes where, hey, like this wouldn't fit. We had to make this change, but we use the measurements that we've already calculated. We use his friction loss. We make these adjustments. And when we fire that machine up and we're getting at or under that static pressure, to me, that's incredible. That machine could build this perfectly mathematically perfect concept of what a duct system would look like and how that machine would operate in response. And then when we actually do it, I just think it is such a cool thing. And it's something that we always try to make sure we're celebrating somehow when it's done, because it's never anything I do. It's always the guys that are out there in the field that always have that intent that, hey, these ducts need to be tight. We need to stretch out this flex. We need to make sure everything is as prescribed so we can be as close as possible to all those ACA manuals that we started at the beginning of this entire process. And it's something that we also make sure that the homeowners see and understand. We want to make sure that they understand that we expect a certain amount of infiltration. We expect a certain amount of air in each room. We expect these rooms to be balanced at the end. And then we provide them documentation when it's all over. We did it. This is done. And we've balanced the air. We verified the airflow. And we know what we're going to get in reality because we built it the way it was supposed to be on paper. So that's always a nice way to end those processes where we can show people, remember 6 months ago when we got this thing done, you didn't really understand it or like it? We did it. And now you get to enjoy the benefits of that dialed in home.
Very nice. After this process is all done, have you had many places where you've gone back and asked, what do you love about your HVAC system question in a follow-up manner? What do you love about it now?
We haven't, but we should. But we've put in, over my tenure of HVAC, I don't know how many people have ever called after we put in a unit and they're like, hey, I love my new basic change out. But we generally, I would say half of the time, which is a huge number relative to everybody else that would call and respond with positive feedback, when they get that finished product of that attic restoration, they make sure they let us know. And they make sure that they tell the guys, because this is another big thing that we emphasize and do on every job, because we're going to be at your house for a while. If we're going to restore your attic, we'll be there for a few days. We want to make sure you know what we're doing up there without having to actually go into your gross attic. We use an app. It's called Company Cam, but we're able to take as many pictures as we want every day and show them to the homeowner with explanations as to what we're doing, because we want them to understand this process. Because a lot of times, especially depending on how far they want to go with this upgrade to their mechanical, it's not inexpensive and it's not quick. So we want to make sure you know that there's a lot of attention. There's a lot of focus on this result being the bill of goods that you were originally sold. We want to make sure we're finishing on that. And then you get to see the craftsmanship of what these guys are doing. I'm not a handy person. I don't even like putting holes in drywall, put a thermostat wire through. So to me, these guys are making big 90s with ductboard. To me, that's impressive. And other homeowners, it's nice when we get that same response for them. Like, wow, I had no idea how much detail and how much craftsmanship went into this. But why would that? You don't want to crawl around in a Florida attic. No one does. But it's nice to be able to show them to the extent that we're really paying attention to these details for their house. And then they get to reap the benefits when they're done. I'm just trying, there's been no negative feedback either. I think everybody we've talked to, but I do want to ask the do you love it thing. I'm trying to get back to that. I can't wait to do that to the next time we finish one of these projects, to ask them, hey, what do you love about it now? Because they will have an answer now. There is this whole new level of control and they will like that.
That's a great starter question, but to end with that after a month or 2 months of runtime, something like that, to go back and say, hey, what do you love about it now?
That's a deep thought. That's some deep thinking stuff. I like that. I can't wait to do that.
Cool. I would love to hear more about that and what responses you get and if people pay more attention to that. I feel like they might.
I know they will, just because even like when we're done with these projects, the type of feedback that we're getting when we are getting feedback, they almost sound like an AC guy. They're using like impressive terms and the RH is way down, or they're talking CFM. And I'm like, that's awesome that you've paid attention to what we were talking about and that you've seen the work that we're doing and cared enough to remember these terms, because that's not something people casually use. They don't just casually throw out CFM or static pressure, but they're paying attention and noticing these things and appreciate what happens when it's done. I can't wait to ask that question. And I will remember to make sure that I mention you as the person who told me to do it at the end. And I'll just keep forgetting the first guy. I'm not going back.
No credit necessary there, and no credit necessary. I think it's great that you're doing this. And I love the fact that you're getting these homeowners engaged enough to remember those phrases or remember that the things that you're talking about. I really think that's a fantastic thing. And that has been, I see a lot of places really struggling to accomplish that. So I think it's really cool what you've done here.
It's honestly a result of everyone should be better. You learn from your mistakes. Is that when we got into these initially, I think we under-communicated it. We didn't give it the attention that it deserved. We didn't communicate as much as we should have. And then when we started to communicate more, we noticed this is going better. So now we may even over-communicate. I don't know, but I would rather over-communicate than under-communicate. And I think a big learning curve that really changed our trajectory is that at the beginning phases, we're going to let them know there's always going to be this process, especially if we go with an encapsulated attic with all these dehumidifiers like your house. And they always usually start with this is, hey, like my wood floors are moving in this season and that season, like things are settling and changing and cracking. I'm always having to caulk or repaint. And we just, at the beginning, this is what you can expect when we're done. And there will be this period of time where we're going to remove all the excess moisture from your air. And then it will come out of your furniture. Then it will come out of the trusses in your attic. But eventually you'll get to this settled in point and it will stay there now moving forward. As long as there's maintenance and all these machines are operating, you might not have to caulk anymore. This is going to settle and stay because now that there's control of the humidity in your attic, there's control of the humidity in your living space. There's no need for anything to really move anymore. You're taken care of on all facets. That's been a big learning curve for us. It is something that's really helped us out a lot. Is setting the expectation of what's going to happen after we're done and making sure that they understand that there might be, especially like in an encapsulated attic, there's going to be some responsibility on your end as the homeowner. Before, when you had open attics and ridge vents, there was some involuntary movement of air happening all the time, whether you liked it or not. You really couldn't turn it off. And now that you're encapsulated, if there's air moving in your house, it has to have a purpose and it has to be intentional and it has to come from a fan that turns on and off. So it's just setting that tone at the beginning and explaining that at the beginning. Why am I changing a filter in my dehumidifier in the attic? Like, I should have told you that 9 months ago. Why didn't I think of that? So you learn from your mistakes. And I think we're really settling in and getting pretty good at it now.
For sure. One of the things somebody taught me one time was just try to be better than yourself.
Always growing.
Always grow. I find it interesting sometimes as business people, we focus on what our competition's doing and trying to be better than competition. I'm like, a lot of days I just want to get up and be better than I was yesterday. I want to be better than myself in the past.
That's our reoccurring theme is 1% better every day. Just 1% better every day. It builds up and just be patient with that process.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to watch that process and watch it go that slow because we want to go really, really fast. But oftentimes that 1% better every day is the best way to go because you get there and you've got a solid foundation built once you get down the road.
Yes. And also just being okay with making mistakes and trying new things. Because if you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're dying. The moment you think that you have it all figured out, it's over. like you can't continue to grow. You always have to be open-minded to trying new things and then reasonably, realistically evaluating how that went. And if it went good, great, do it again. But if it didn't, try something different. We can always go back to the old way. We knew that worked, but there always has to be this urge to try to learn and press and try new things and being okay with, hey, that didn't work. And don't beat anybody up over it. Don't beat yourself up over it. You've learned from that. Do it better next time.
So really making intentional changes based on the information you've seen from your past.
And that's the nice thing about being able to, with the advancement of all these tools that we have, is that it's not someone's opinion. And I think a lot of times there was a year where I was the head of building performance at a general contractor, and I wasn't in HVAC, but I worked with HVAC contractors. And every one of them, we would say, hey, prerequisite, when we do these projects is we're going to do a tightness test on the ducts. And everyone's immediate response is, oh, my ducts are tight. And I'm sure they are. But we're going to find out. We're just going to know now. And it always went the same way, where the first time they were very standoffish, didn't really want to do it, but then they were tight. And then they would go do the next duct system, and they'd want it to be even tighter than that last duct system. So it's something where they're constantly chasing, like, oh, I'm doing a really good job. I'm going to do it better on this one. So it's nice to have, now that we have Balance started, we have our core group, is those guys are always chasing the tightest duct system. Like, we have a little competition where we keep those things posted. We keep them up on a wall, but we always, like, the tighter ones are like, we nailed this one. And they're all tight. We go in with the expectation that they're going to be tight, but there's some that are just outrageously tight, but that's because everybody's buying in and everybody cares, and it really matters to everybody here, which is a great thing.
That's awesome. Make it a little competition with yourself and a little bit tighter every time.
Yeah, you have to. And then they're thinking about different ways to make it tighter. And I'm like, I love that. That's what it has to be. Because if we keep doing this same thing, we can only make it so tight. But if we can make it we have to do something a little different. Now we got it a little tighter, and we have something now.
That is so awesome to hear. I'm happy to have you on here to be able to share this story with some people, because I think there's going to be a lot of people get some good stuff out of this. Anything else you want to share with our listeners? Any thoughts? I think we're getting close to our end time here, so we're going to look at closing this down, unfortunately.
I just want to say thanks for having me on. I've been like a longtime fan. Remember, like, our initial interview, I was like starstruck talking to you, but I love this community. I love being able to talk to everybody, because I think everybody has the best of intentions in this realm. And I think the more that we can talk about it, and the more that we can make it something that is, we get better at talking about it, we can have the conversation with more people. Because I think there's a lot of people, especially in the AC trade, who want to do great things, and change outs and service are just the tip of that iceberg. And there's so many components that go into a well-installed system, from design to commissioning. I just love that we have these opportunities to talk about these things, spark interest, and spark new thoughts, and get new people thinking about stuff different ways. Because there's a lot of really smart people in this trade that I don't know if they've had maximum opportunity to capitalize on how capable that they are. So I just think it's awesome that we can keep listening to this podcast, other podcasts, HVAC School, all those podcasts that are saying the same thing, preaching the same word. And I think we're getting through. And I just appreciate having the time to come on, and you have taken the time to let me come on and talk about what we're doing down here at Balance.
We appreciate that. And it sounds like you have a very well balanced approach to this.
Hey, there we go. You're good. Roll credits. That was great.
We got to get one in here every once in a while.
We always flag it. If somebody uses the word balance organically in a conversation, we're all like, oh, so you're on board. You're with it. Let's go.
Absolutely. Marco, thanks very much for coming on. Marco Radocaj, everybody, Balance HVAC out of Vero Beach, Florida. You going to make any of the conferences this year? You going to make it up to AHR or anything like that?
I want to. It's been first year of a new business. It's been very busy. I don't know when it settles, but I want to. I do want to. And if I'm not, someone from Balance will be there, because I think, like I said, I love being around people talking about this stuff. I could go all day. I love it. I hope to make it.
Hopefully we'll get to see you there and visit with everybody there at AHR, and maybe over at the HVACR School Symposium. So
I'd love it.
That'd be a great time. Marco, thanks again for coming on, and we will talk to everybody next time on the Building HVAC Science Podcast.
Thanks again for taking a few minutes to share some time with us and listen to Marco Radocaj talk about Balanced HVAC's approach to HVAC. If you have any questions or want to suggest a topic or just reach out to us, contact us at marketing@truetechtools.com, TRUTECHTOOLS.com. The Building HVAC Science Podcast is a production of True Tech Tools Limited. In full disclosure, I'm an owner of True Tech. The opinions voiced are those of my guests, my co-host, or myself, depending on who is speaking, of course. And if you're in the market for any tools or test instruments mentioned in their podcast, or just have a general need in the HVAC and building performance world, take a look at what TrueTechTools.com offers, TRUTECHTOOLS.com. I think you'd be surprised if you haven't looked lately at all the various tools and test instruments that we offer. And you can also use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. I want to thank you for listening to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Other great trade-related resources out there and influencers include Quality HVAC, Service Business Mastery, Tool Pros, HVAC Reefer Guy, Stephen Reardon, HVAC Shop Talk, HVACR School, The Misfits of HVAC, HVA Chicks, Measure Quick, AC Service Tech, HomeDiagnosis.tv, HVACR videos, the HVAC Grapevine, and HVAC Overtime. Give a listen or give a watch to all those resources. Help expand your mind, change your thinking, do something different, maybe solve some problems. Again, thank you for listening to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. We hope to have you back next time. Take care.